I never thought I'd be the kind of person to stand in the middle of a five-star ballroom, surrounded by gold, leafed centerpieces and $250,000 worth of vanity, and feel like I was looking at a crime scene. But as I watched my brother, David, toast to his new life with a glass of champagne that cost more than my daughter's monthly treatments, I realized that family is sometimes just a word people use to keep you quiet while they bleed you dry. My daughter was dying in a hospital bed 3 miles away because we couldn't afford the experimental procedure that was her only hope, and my own parents and brother had looked me in the eye and told me they were strapped for cash, while signing the check for a custom-made ice sculpture of a swan. Was I wrong for what I did next? Was I the villain for taking the one thing they valued more than life itself and using it as a bargaining chip to save my little girl? I honestly want you to tell me if you would have done the same thing, because by the end of this night, I wasn't just a grieving father. I was the only person standing between my family and the total ruin of their precious reputation. To understand how we got to that ballroom, you have to understand the dynamic of the Miller family. My parents, Robert and Elena, have always been obsessed with the image of success. I was the older son, the one who was supposed to be the corporate lawyer or the surgeon, but I followed my heart into teaching and married Sarah, a social worker. We weren't wealthy, but we were happy. Then came David. David was the golden child, the one who stayed in the family business, the one who bought the right cars and dated the right women. My parents doted on him because he was a reflection of their own ego. Everything was fine until 3 years ago, when my daughter, Maya, was diagnosed with a rare aggressive form of leukemia. Our world shattered. We spent every cent we had. We sold our house, moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, and took on every extra shift possible. Sarah and I were exhausted, drained, and desperate. Last year, a specialist told us about a new clinical trial and a subsequent specialized surgery that had an incredibly high success rate. But because it was experimental and required out-of-state travel to a private facility, the cost was astronomical. Nearly $200,000 including the aftercare. I went to my parents first. I sat in their mahogany-lined study, clutching Maya's medical records, and literally begged. My father looked at me with this hollow, doubt sympathy and said, "Son, you know the economy is tight. We've got so much tied up in investments. We just don't have that kind of liquid cash lying around." 2 weeks later, they announced they were throwing David the wedding of the century to his fiancée, Chloe, a socialite whose family was even more obsessed with status than mine. They bragged about the $250,000 budget. They talked about the imported flowers, the designer dress, and the 3-day resort buyout. I was invisible. My daughter's life was a liquidity issue. But David's wedding was a necessity for the family brand. I spent months watching them post updates on social media about cake tastings and venue tours, while I watched Maya lose her hair and her smile. The resentment didn't just grow, it calcified. I stopped calling, I stopped visiting, but then, 2 days before the wedding, the liquidity shifted. My father's business, the one David helped run, hit a catastrophic legal snag. A massive contract they had been banking on was frozen due to a compliance error that only someone with my specific, niche background in educational policy and local government liaison work, which I did on the side for the school board, could navigate. They had accidentally violated a series of zoning and public interest statutes that threatened to not only pull the contract but result in millions of dollars in fines and the potential loss of their business license. They were arrogant, but they weren't stupid. They knew I was the only person who had the rapport with the local council and the specific knowledge to file the emergency injunction and represent them in the closed-door hearing scheduled for Monday, after the wedding, they needed me. They needed me to save their empire so they could keep playing pretend in their tuxedos. So here I was, standing in that ballroom. The music was swelling, the smell of expensive lilies was sickeningly sweet, and my mother was draped in diamonds. David came up to me, looking smug, and whispered, "Glad you could make it, bro. Dad said you're going to fix that little paperwork issue on Monday. Really appreciate you stepping up for the family." I looked at him, then at my parents who were beaming at the head table, and then I looked at my phone. A text from Sarah, "Maya's fever is up. She's asking for you. I'm scared." That was the moment something in me snapped. I realized that for years I had played by their rules of family loyalty. But that loyalty was a one-way street. They were spending $250,000 on a party while my daughter's life hung by a thread, and now they wanted me to save the very wealth they refused to share. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I had the power to save their entire future, or I could let it all burn down the way they let my daughter's health decline. Before I tell you what happened next and how I handled that confrontation, I want you to pause and comment below. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have been the bigger person and helped them, or would you have demanded a price for your soul? I walked straight up to the head table during the main course. The clinking of silver, where stopped as I stood there, still in my off. The rack suit that looked like a rag compared to their custom tailoring. My father looked up, a glass of vintage wine in his hand. "Not now, Marcus." He hissed, "We're about to do the dances." I didn't whisper. I spoke loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "I need $200,000, right now, wire transfer." The color drained from my mother's face. David stood up, his face reddening. "Are you kidding me? This is my wedding day. We told you we don't have." I cut him off. "You have it. It's right here. It's in the silk drapes, the open bar, and Chloe's $10,000 veil. You have it, and you're going to give it to me, or I am walking out that door, turning off my phone, and letting the council revoke your licenses on Monday morning." My father tried to grab my arm, but I stepped back. I told him that I had already drafted a message to my contact at the city's legal department. If I didn't send a confirmation that I was taking the case by midnight, they were moving forward with the full audit. "You want me to save your business, fine, but my daughter's life is the fee. If you don't have the liquid cash by the time the cake is cut, you can find another consultant to save your company. Good luck finding one who knows the council members by their first names." The tension was thick enough to choke on. Chloe started crying, David was hurling insults, and my parents were trapped. They valued their reputation more than anything, and the thought of me causing a scene or, worse, letting them lose their status was unbearable. Under the guise of settling a family matter, my father took me to the courtroom. He was shaking with rage. "You're extorting your own father." He spat. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "No, I'm finally putting a price on the help you've felt entitled to for free. You let Maya suffer. You chose this party over her. Now, you choose your business over this party." It took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of frantic phone calls and hushed arguments. But the transfer went through. I saw the confirmation on my banking app. The full amount needed for Maya's surgery and travel. I didn't stay for the cake. I didn't stay for the toasts. I walked out of that ballroom, drove straight to the hospital, and showed Sarah the screen. We both cried, not out of joy for the money, but out of the sheer relief that the nightmare of helplessness was over. The aftermath was exactly as cold as you'd expect. I did my job on Monday. I'm a professional, and I had given my word. I navigated the legal hurdles, saved their contracts, and ensured their business stayed afloat. but the moment the paperwork was signed, I blocked all of them. My parents sent a scathing email calling me a mercenary and saying I was no longer welcome in the family. David told everyone at his country club that I had robbed him on his wedding day. They tried to paint me as the villain of the story to anyone who would listen. But here's the thing, Maya had her surgery. It was a grueling 6 months, but she's in remission now. She's playing in the park, she's growing her hair back, and she's alive. When I look at my daughter, I don't feel a single ounce of regret. My parents saved their business, and I saved my child. They got the image they wanted, and I got the life that actually mattered. I realized that family isn't about blood or shared last names. It's about who shows up when the world is falling apart. They didn't show up for me, so I stopped showing up for them on their terms. I traded a relationship with people who didn't love my daughter enough to save her for the chance to watch her grow up. To me, that's the best deal I've ever made. Looking back, I learned that sometimes you have to play the game by the rules of the people you're dealing with. If they only value money and power, then money and power are the only languages they'll understand when you need their help. It's a hard lesson to learn, especially when it involves the people who raised you. But my priority will always be the family I built, not the one I was born into. If you were in my shoes, would you have let the business fail out of spite? Or would you have done what I did to secure the money? Was I wrong to extort them at a wedding, or was it the only way to get their attention? Like this video if you were on my side and think Maya's life was worth more than a party. Subscribe for more stories like this, where the underdog finally takes a stand. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I'm curious to see if anyone thinks I went too far. I'll see you all in the next story.